Hey, welcome back to the Risk and Roll podcast. Let's just dive right in because there is an executive order that ATR should consider, and ATR, ability to repay, should consider whether someone could be deported and thus it would adversely affect their ability to repay. So, what in the world? I mean, I need a background on that. So, CFPB's ability to repay rule, the ATRs, and Reg Z requires mortgage lenders to make a reasonable and good faith determination that a borrower can actually repay the loan. The question being raised right now is if a borrower is not authorized to work in the United States or is here on temporary order, should a lender consider the possibility that the borrower could lose employment income because of immigration enforcement or deportation? The executive order directive apparently suggests that CFPB should clarify that answer, and it may be yes. So topics abound on this when it's risk and rolling the dice. What are you going to do from a compliance standpoint? I'm going to start at my bottom left corner here, which it's a podcast. I don't even know why I give directions at this point because the screen's just going to pop up with this smiling face, and now everybody's just excited. Who's it going to be? Race Nigel, you're a first up to bat. What are your thoughts and takes on this?
Thanks, Nathan. And yeah, this is something that came out recently. And, as policy statements are, they're not law, they're not rule, they're not regulation per se, but they are kind of a good directive. Often they can be used as tools to understand what we're supposed to do with the regulation, especially if it's unclear. I would say in this instance, if you look at the statement, it cites both Regulation Z and Regulation B. So in other words, so TILA, right, and ECOA. So in the context of, you have ability to repay, and also what can you legally consider when weighing someone for underwriting, which is more of a Reg B thing. And basically, it hasn't changed anything, right? It's basically just stating what's already in there, which wasn't confusing, at least to me, insofar as anything. So the purposes of the statement is interesting, maybe questionable, but it didn't tell us anything new. But what it does tell us is, hey, when you're talking about someone who's an immigrant, don't forget that if they don't have income long term because of the immigration status, that could go into your ability to repay. So they're tying that together more from a Reg B, where you already could consider immigration status, and saying that could affect ability to repay. I'm not so sure, and we can talk to Dana and others here who've done it, but I'm not so sure that's news to us. It's kind of what we had considered before inability to repay, I'm sure, as long as it's on its face. Remember, you don't have to consider what will happen, the unknown, at the time that you issue your credit decision. You're basing everything on the presumption everything is correct and will stay that way. Should something unexpected happen afterwards, we're not supposed to read, we're not expected to read tea leaves or have a magic 8-ball. But this is before you underwrite, what can you take into consideration? And that's what they're really kind of pushing the agenda a little bit here.
Let's take that. Who's got a follow up on that one? I mean, Dana, I might lean to Dana or to Greg here because you both deal opposite sides of this coin.
Yeah, Dan, I'll defer to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I find it's an interesting dialogue for sure. I mean, in private lending, we're working with ITIN borrowers, foreign nationals all the time, right? Because we are not qualifying off the individual borrower's ability to repay. We're qualifying it off of the property itself, right? Asset-based lending. But that isn't to say that we don't have a consideration for the actual status, right? Non-perm versus perm, those types of things, because we do want to have a consideration if they are going to be extended a loan for whatever that term is, and mine happens to be, substantially shorter than, from a traditional lending perspective, that they will be able to make that payment for the determination. So I'm not mad about the thought of it, right? I think we should always be assessing, but at the same turn, one of the things from an underwriting perspective is we look at, someone in, a particular job history, and maybe they're W-2, but they've jumped. Well, as an underwriter, I'm assessing, will they continue to have that job after I close on my loan? So I really don't see it much differently from, that type of assessment versus just being focused on the actual immigration piece of it. I think from a responsible lending perspective, we have to look at it as a whole.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I think the administration does seem to be putting its thumb on the scale a little bit in the sort of the preamble or the statement of purpose of the executive order. It talks about the things that can go wrong with immigration. So I do think that you've both, Ray and Dana, laid it out very nicely that there's a tension here between Reg B and Reg Z. Reg B, in fact, in 76 was expanded explicitly to prohibit discrimination on the basis of national origin. So that's sort of baked into this whole thing too. I thought I'd put my thumb on the other side of the scale a little bit, just to leaven the conversation a little bit with some interesting observations from the Constitution, to kind of say, hey, not all immigrants are bad. In fact, we're a nation of immigrants. In fact, the requirements for being a congressman, congressperson, or a senator. It's people normally think about the age, 25 and 30 years old, respectively. It also has to do with how many years you've been a citizen, 7 and 9 years, respectively. And in fact, today we have 19 people in Congress who were not born citizens of the United States. So it's just part of the fabric of who we are. And I'll just kind of throw that out there as we keep talking about Reg B and Reg Z.
I didn't know that stat, Greg. That's very, very cool.
It is great.
And my hope is they're all homeowners.
Right.
Exactly.
At least once. So Bob, what do you think? I mean, you kind of leverage this up, and when we talk about risk and money laundering too, this kind of goes into play.
I encourage everybody to read Ray's analysis. Bottom line is, and Ray and I have discussed this, I think this EO just puts sand in the gears. I don't think it changes anything. If I'm running a mortgage company, I don't have any different meeting. I don't have a pronouncement Monday morning and say, oh, look what we have to do different. We're all trying to live within the ATR rules. There's the distinction that what is the language? Unforeseen versus reasonably anticipated. Is it unforeseen? We're not responsible. Should it have been reasonably anticipated? Well, that's where this executive order just throws sand in the gears. What's reasonably anticipated? And let's just admit, because we can't talk about this without admitting it, does this mean I have to judge you by how dark your skin is? Are we even going to have that conversation? What are we doing? When we throw this, well, did you suspect? How good was their English? Could they speak? I mean, if you're really going to get into what might be the hallmarks of somebody who's not supposed to be here, it lends itself to some very uncomfortable conversations. And I can feel the spines stiffen right now of people listening to this podcast going, Simpson, did you really just say that? I think you have to talk about this if you're really going to talk about this. I know several illegal immigrants, and one of the guys I love dearly is French and came here and got married specifically in an immigration deal with the woman. I don't think they ever spent a night together. They just arranged that he was going to get his citizenship, and he did. I don't want to ask those questions. I know none of you want to ask those questions. And I can't think of one meeting I'm going to hold differently on Monday morning because of this executive order. Am I missing something, guys?
Well,
go
ahead, Ray. You first.
I'm going to say, I think that's right. I mean, as we're talking here, Bob hit the third rail that we need to talk about on this thing, right? And rightfully so. What is it? I guess we're concerned about Canadians crossing the border. Not really sure, but the question is, now what do I do with this information? Is there an expectation that, what do I reasonably suspect that someone's income is going to continue based on, I don't know, surname? Not really sure. And now I've got this issue of a fair lending issue, right, as well, which is an ECOA violation, amongst others, as well as fair housing. So it kind of sets a trap for us if you're not careful. I don't think it's an intent. Well, maybe. I don't think it's an intentional one. I'm not trying to catch us in a fair lending issue. But that becomes a question. If this is about those who are not here legally otherwise, and we have to determine, whether they are or not, and what that can do. In other words, they can be deported. Then, that might be that may be the target. And how do you manage for that? Now, if you consider deportation percentages are pretty darn low, no matter what, even in this administration. So what are the odds, right? That again, people who are here illegally, and the deportation is relatively small. How do I know that they're going to be the ones of that 3% or whatever that's going to be deported? So it's a challenging issue, creates a challenge. But going to Bob's point, I think it's business as usual, because we've kind of known this already, just the way things are structured. So why are you giving us additional instruction, and what is your intent? Certainly becomes a little bit questionable as we try to run our business. It's just flat out, this is about running the business.
I just
Yeah.
can't think of any instruction that I would give my underwriters, my loan officers as a result of this EO.
Agreed.
I just don't know of any instruction I would give them.
Well, let's take a look at you all have mentioned, and I think accurately, Reg B, ECOA. You've got fair lending, fair housing issues, because all of this, to some degree, would require the underwriter to ask a question that would be out of the bounds per se. So, but let's refresh first on the 8 ability to repay factors. We're MLO Force is putting the finishing touches on our 20-hour pre-licensing. We're going through a lot of this, but if it's been a while since you've studied for your test, which for a lot of us or some of us, some of y'all haven't even taken the test, so don't even nod your head, because I have, and it's terrible. Look, the 8 points we go: current or reasonably expected income or assets. Okay, Dana touched on that one. Employment status, because you have to know they're employed or what the structure history is. You can't guarantee, just like nobody's got a crystal ball of what's coming, but do they have the history to at least help us feel more confident about the future? The monthly payment on the subject loan, the monthly payment on any simultaneous loans, the monthly payment for mortgage related obligations, taxes, insurance, HOAs, etc., current debt obligations, alimony and child support, debt to income ratio, DTI, and or residual income to overset, and credit history. ATR covers those 8 points. We're talking about, really, they're kind of leaning in on number 2, the employment status. And then I would say the debt to income ratio, number 7, will they have enough residual income or income coming in if there was a transition happening that would actually throw this off? I think, and would propose, probably some of the fear structure is that with a focus on a status, residential status in the United States, it is a risk that if you take somebody, and I'm just countering this argument a little bit, I don't disagree with anything said so far, but if you take the risk point and say, look, there's a potential higher than not risk that they will get deported or forcibly removed from the US, can you grade that note on the secondary market the same as you grade the notes done by a US citizen with a history of employment who isn't facing that risk analysis? And this is coming out of the 2008 crash, right? Can you grade? That's where ATR comes from. So I guess maybe that's the second part of the question, outside of the feelings. From just a purely economical standpoint, is the grade the same on a loan that could have that outside ATR risk?
Let me pose, based on that, let me pose a scenario where it turns into a head scratcher. If you say that, what was your stat, Ray? 97% of people aren't going to get deported, who might be 97%.
67%.
We're seeing massive layoffs. Larry Ellison just laid off a ton of them. Do I have to grade you on your ability to repay because you're in tech? You're a coder. I think you're going to lose your job due to AI. How many marriages end in divorce? Do I have to now ding you because I really don't like the quality and nature of your relationship with your spouse? I'm judging that. I saw you fighting when you were in here signing loan documents. I heard the way you talk to each other. Does that affect my judgment of your ability to repay? I think there are a lot greater risks that lenders face of the vicissitudes of life. And anytime I can lob the word vicissitude into a conversation, I'm going to do it. If you've got divorce, cancer, job loss, working for Larry Ellison as part of your risk profile, aren't those all greater than the chance of being deported? I mean, I lived in Savannah for 4 years, and we built a huge Korean car plant just outside of Savannah, Georgia, by Pooler. And immigration came in and raided everybody, claimed they didn't have a right to be working in the United States. It was a big brouhaha in Savannah. Those people all had a right to be here, and there was a misjudgment in tossing them out. There was a misjudgment. I just don't know that the risk of default is any bigger than your 35-year-old child who's working for Google. I just don't know that the risk is any bigger.
That's a
I'm
fascinating.
just going to throw the thing out that maybe what we're really not saying is I personally don't think that the administration that has put this EO out is really calculating what the ATR piece of it really is. This administration has stood on immigration. And so I really see this more as in order, giving more testimony to that's what this administration is standing on without any relevancy to it actually impacting the mortgage market. That's my opinion, whether it's, right or wrong, that, that's the administration position. But I think that, right. I don't really see that there is any relevant movement on this order that will be implemented in any mortgage shop. And it really is just one more little card out there of, hey, I told you, this is what I was going to stand on. This is what we're going to stand on. And so I'm going to put an EOL on it.
I agree, and the one thing that I think going back, and Nathan, your point is well taken. It's like, do we price it differently, et cetera? And then Bob coming back with, well, then we have to consider everything, which we already kind of do, but we can't. Marriage is protected, so on and so forth. So that makes us really challenge questions. I think the feeling emotional side that comes from this is more about what are we normalizing now in our business, and if we spent a lot of time learning to be, if it wasn't innate, learning to be objective in everything we do to make credit decisions, then this is kind of going against it possibly if we believe what the intent is. And now we have to scrutinize things, or more importantly, we think we have license that we can do that. When maybe, in my opinion, it's nothing different. So we shouldn't be. So again,
yeah,
I only
that's the
caution
real
about we're
fear
normalizing.
here, right, Ray?
Yes,
is that
exactly.
this could institute some type of redlining situation.
Exactly.
Correct.
Exactly.
It does.
Greg, you got something?
Yep.
You got something to
Yeah,
follow up?
no, these are all great thoughts. I think it does have echoes of what the government has done wrong in the past, but then you have to think about what the practitioners of the industry have done wrong in the recent past, in the wild times of the early 2000s. There's responsibility across the board, but I think what this executive order does is stirs up, makes the water opaque to some degree, because a mortgage loan officer, while they do have responsibility, obviously, and that's what Dodd-Frank was all about, they're not immigration law adjudicators, and there's nuance in temporary status, in work authorizations, et cetera, et cetera. And are we really expecting every practitioner, every LO to be to understand how all of that works, and whether to say yes or to say no based on what they're seeing in front of them? I think that might be a little bit of a burden too far. But I think the risk on the other side is, well, and I think this is kind of what we're hinting at with the allusion to redlining, different sort of redlining, where the LOs will get super conservative and say, well, I'm just going to say no to these loans, or the underwriting department will.
And I think, Greg, it's weaponizing, right? Depending how they think, it could be weaponizing in its worst case. That, well, it's discouraging applications now, which is an ECOA violation in its own right, as well as for housing. So it's discouraging applications because then they feel empowered. And again, this is assuming that you have people out there who are intentionally doing that. But again, this is why I always say, be careful what you normalize, because when you normalize, we become weaponized. So.
100%. I think also
theory,
adding in a layer to that, to your point, Greg, on the loan officer burden here. I mean, if I pulled 10 loan officers and asked them to give me the difference between a permanent resident alien, a non-resident alien, and a foreign national, I would bet 9 out of 10 could not give me the difference. And so now we're asking them for an additional layer on top of that when they don't have a basic understanding of what the statuses are to begin with.
Yeah, Nathan, what do you think about that? Because that's the core of your focus with MLO Force.
Right.
Is that the way it just works, or is there a gap there that should be, where the needle should be moved?
No, I agree with what Dana says. This feels like a headline grab, and whatever the courts then decide, if nobody challenges it and it passes, then it's a headline. Look what we did, but it has no bearing whatsoever on us, because the other part of compliance and structure is that I can unintentionally violate one rule while trying to abide and follow all the rules over here. Like it's like, wait a minute, did I ask that question? Did I ask how many kids you have because I'm trying to deny your loan, or because the 1003 says how many kids do you have and what are their ages? I don't know. Like you have to teach, all right? It's ethical decision making and structure points. At the end of the day, I agree with Bob. Like, there is no way any of us can actually validate and structure. The only thing I see this happening is in the secondary market when it comes to warehousing these and doing mortgage-backed securities. And there will be a tag in here of like, hey, based on current standards in the United States, we might have to downgrade this by 0.0001% of confidence because of numbers. Like, it's a stats and probability game. The breakdown, if you really want to dig into it, as a new buyer in 2007, when I bought my house, not knowing anything about the industry because I wasn't licensed yet, I shouldn't have been approved to buy another house because my history showed that I made a poor decision on the first one. But FHA gave me a chance to get another loan, because then I did cross the ATR threshold and I did learn something. I just think we have to deal with stats and probability. Stats and probability says this is really not a probable or an issue. It's an emotional one. It's gotten time on podcasts. It gets time on news channels. It gets headlines. And then what happens? It gets no change whatsoever, because I totally agree with y'all. Why would anybody call a meeting about this for their underwriting team?
Just keep originating good loans. Everybody wants to originate. Everybody wants to originate good ones. No one wants to originate bad ones, and keep doing what you're doing. I got no changes out of this pronouncement for you.
Exactly.
I love
I've got
it.
one more constitutional bookend, if I can throw it in there, Nathan.
Ooh, nice.
And that is that, we know that the tension, or not tension, just the evolution of John Locke's life, liberty, and property into Thomas Jefferson's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as unalienable rights in our wonderful Declaration of Independence. Well, life, liberty, and property made it back into the Constitution. And I didn't realize that until rereading it recently. And they're in the two due process sections in the amendments, in the Fifth Amendment and the 14th Amendment. Life, liberty, and property are both called out and explicitly extended, or in the sort of in the negative. You can't deprive people of those three things without due process. And it's explicit about any person. It doesn't extend to citizens. So I know we're not talking about depriving somebody of a property they don't own yet by denying them a mortgage, but the connection there was close enough that I thought I'd throw it out there as more food for thought.
That's a great final step right there. So, well, thanks, y'all. Good topic. Dana, Ray, Bob, Greg, appreciate your time as always. We are the Risk and Roll podcast, coming at you with hot takes on new trends and compliance. Really, I'm working on a bunch of taglines. We'll see how that one lands. You guys are the best.
The one that Molly threw out: compliance without the bow tie, or compliance without the tie.
I take that as a personal affront. I'm wearing a bow tie.
I was going to say. Yeah.